Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Weedy Virtual Spotlight, CareOregon's strategy to solve prior authorization complexity with automated workflows. This spotlight is sponsored by Edifecs, a Cotiviti business. Just a reminder, all questions can be entered through the chat window in your Zoom toolbar. It's my pleasure to introduce Ankur Nagpal with Edifecs.
Thanks, Michael. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you so much for hosting us. Hello, everyone. This is Ankur Nagpal. I am working as a Senior Director of Product Management at Edifecs, who is now part of the Cotiviti business, and I am responsible for leading our prior authorization strategy, including the 57F. That's the game-changing, world-changing kind of mandate that's evolving day by day. I am supported here today, one or co-chaired rather today with Luke Ferrell, who is the enterprise architect at CareOregon, and certainly would like to take you through a lot of aspects, approaches, thought processes, and also innovation that basically kind of continues to guide us toward how we approach this. So with that, let me quickly dive into the agenda. So overall, we want to make sure that we can help everybody understand that. See, everybody has heard about the 57F mandate. We have had enough discussions around what does the mandate include, the different set of APIs, all centered towards patients, providers, payer data exchange, and EPA, which is electronic prior authorization. The focus today is to basically talk about, is it fair to say that this is purely compliance, or thinking carefully, does it become a strategic investment where we together, working with our partner plans, kind of think about how best we can not just solve this problem, but also innovate in a way that can meaningfully change the lives, not just of members who we truly serve, but also caregivers, also staff, medical nurses, everybody who are basically part of this big puzzle. How can we impact the lives in a more meaningful way? And how can we take this to the next level? Today, we'll be covering mostly around the prior authorization high level. Most of the work basically that we'll talk about is Luke is basically going to be talking about the CareOregon's approach, vision, the overall thought process, how the mandate is being looked at, and how CareOregon is basically looking at solving this challenge. And then how we basically are working together, coming with a solution that can basically help not just solve, but also see how best we can evolve this to a different level. So with that, let's quickly move to the next slide. Like I said earlier, I think we have been kind of focused on looking at what it means when we talk about 57F mandate. And it's actively nearing compliance, right? We have the dates approaching very quickly. There is going to be time for implementation. And there's a lot of technical as well as groundwork that needs to happen to take this off. But does it actually translate directly to business value, right? The goal is to understand that this project cannot just stop at compliance, but if we think carefully about integrating real operations, how that would meaningfully change the way this is being thought about, right? Operational outcomes are the ones that should be deriving the value here, not just purely compliance, right? Compliance is a mechanism, a vehicle that can help us get to the place where we can actually see the return on investment, right? And again, prior auth has not been a new transaction or a new exchange. It has been there for ages. Faxes, emails, portals, call centers, EDI, everything basically amounts to a prior authorization. And as we move towards FHIR, increasing turnaround times become a challenge. How can we address that? How can the denial trends lead to a better operational improvement? And focusing on unblocking and unlocking insights, right? So if you move to the next slide on a very, very high level, we talk about the market outlook. And again, when I say market outlook, the goal here is to say that there are several factors that are basically either being influenced or influencing this specific change, right? The slow adoption and barriers, right? which is basically many payers and providers, they're working towards implementing it, but are yet to fully implement it, right? Again, it needs strategy, it needs time, it needs funding. It basically needs to think through how those legacy systems would come together to make something more meaningful. There has been a clear guidance from multiple reports that tell us that this basically, if done right, can lead to major productivity gains. At the end of the day, it is basically not just one team. It is not just a vendor working with another vendor. It is collaboration working towards realizing the true benefit. And with that, I will basically hand it over to Luke so that he can help us understand the overall CareOregon's vision. So Luke, over to you.
All right, thanks, Ankur, for setting that up. We've had some great collaboration already so far, and I wanted to thank the Weedy people for inviting us to do this too. All right, so go to my part of the slideshow, maybe. Okay, so this is our vision for, as Ankur mentioned, this is our vision for taking this further than just the compliance. You know, when you have the hood open, it's, you know, in PA, probably as everybody on the call knows, it's an opportunity, you know, it's a pretty complicated process. And if you're going to start messing with it, you may as well see if you can make improvements. So a little bit about us. We are a mission-driven nonprofit. We serve the Oregon Health Plan. We also do health-related social needs. We have some other things too, like in-home care. We have almost 600,000 members and something like 60,000 providers, depending on how you count TINs and things. And we've been around for like 30 years or so. So what do I want to cover today in my part? This is a vision that has been developing in collaboration with multiple people in our organization and multiple people in Ankur's organization and with some other groups as well. And, you know, as I say, to go beyond compliance to improve the overall PA situation. The solution that we are thinking about is it makes use of portals and pieces that we make, as well as portals and pieces that we have from other people. The Edifecs unified PA module is interqual APIs, something I'm really excited about. Our warehouse, and we also use in Oregon, we have this, in Washington, we have this thing called One Health Port, SSO. And that is a way for all the providers, you know, to log into all the payers at once, which is pretty neat. So today we're just only going to talk about medical PAs. So the problem space, I think we've covered. We're going to look at the authorization flow from intake to determination. We'll talk about some automated responses for simple cases, how we want to use Edifecs's new AI, PA platform to manage the flow, and Interqual's new APIs for criteria and policies. And we'll show you a little bit about what the provider experience would be like. So we do about 150,000 medical PAs a year, so that works out to $12,500 a month. Our members, providers. I think we have an opportunity to improve our visibility to the metrics and being able to understand outcomes and trends, and also understand our process. We have a team of dedicated people. We have 22 PA specialists, and we have some nurses, and we have an MD as well. And they are all engaged in this part of the work operationally. Obviously, we don't want to have turnaround time of 14 days, literally, normally, but you know, that's kind of like the maximum, you know, that you want to go for. In 26, it's going to be less than 7, which I think is a really good thing. And of course, for non-urgent, you have 72 hours. And I think long-term, and there's definitely more involved than just this project to get to long-term, but I do think it's the right reach, is I think we want to have turnaround of instant, you know, for things that anything that can be answered deterministically easily. And then, maybe 1 day or 2 days for most categories. So to the extent we can get more things answered sooner and get the right questions, asked up front, and get the right PAs to the right people on our side most quickly, I think it will, I think that's a good goal. I don't know what all will be involved in getting to that, and then I don't want to talk about dental or BH today. BH is super complicated. DME, we have other vendors for some of these things. We're not going to get into fire technical specifics. Probably, I'm guessing everybody on the call, remembers the vision when fire kind of was developed. And I think maybe we all thought that everybody was going to be up and ready on it by now. But that really, I think there's been a lot of good progress, but it just isn't there. So I think it's really important in our design, and Ankur and his people and I have been talking about this a lot for a year. I think it's really important to be able to handle intake and response from over a variety of methods, even just like the traditional EDI, flat files, whatever you need to do, because we don't want the lack of fire capability to be in the way of improving the process. So we want to be ready for the fire as it comes into use with the systems, EMRs and things. Also, there's other questions that we're not really ready to address. I mean, with fire, you got a skill bench, and you got to make sure the providers are interested in working with you and stuff. And also, we're not going to talk really about portal development. You're just going to see some wireframes and stuff. And I'm not going to get into the build versus buy question. That is a whole another rabbit hole. All right, here's kind of like we'll go into a little bit of the high level architecture. Probably if you know the 57F rule, that there are kind of 3 stages for the PA exchange, and it's especially distinct when you're talking about smart on fire apps. But you've got the coverage, the initial request, and you could call it like a pre-check or an order context, and that's where the provider sends us, things about the member and the diagnosis and procedure and so on. And then we need to respond with questions, cards, coverage, requirements, documents, get that back to the provider so that they can address those things. We also want to try to answer as early as we can, eligibility, code matching, those kinds of things, as well as just if an authorization is not required, we just want to tell them right away, you're good. You don't need to do an auth. That brings up this interesting question of tracking that fact. And so we may wind up doing like a pseudo auth for those no auth needed answers. That'll be interesting too. So then you get to the DTR part, and that's where the provider can review the questions and give answers and feedback and stuff, give us documents. And then that actually gets folded into a bundle that's called the PAS bundle. And that gets combined with the formal PA request. So, and on the answers and docs and all that stuff go over there. And then, it goes over to our engine. And to the extent our engine can still answer things automatically, it will do that. And if it needs to get to the right person, it will do that. So, all right. So this is a landscape that probably a lot of plans have. This should probably look familiar to people. You've got, you probably got a bunch of different intake approaches. You've got providers that have Epic, you got providers that have Athena, you got providers that have Cerner and other systems. And you probably have your own portals. You probably might have Health Trio, something like that, Zapari, things you've made yourself. And, so you're getting that information it's coming through several different methods. And over on your kind of back end side, you've got maybe, you've got maybe QNext or facets. Some of your covered rules are in your QNext. You might have interqual or something similar to that. You might have MCG or something. And so you've got your policies in there. Probably have document templates in different places. And then you've got you've got your support team that has the expertise to address the cases that aren't straightforward. And what's been missing here, what's been missing here all along is this piece in the middle. And this is what I'm really excited about that Edifecs has been doing. And let me see if I can get animation to work. There it is. All right, so Edifecs has got this unified PA module, and I've been fortunate enough to watch them developing it along the way and be able to talk to some of their, their lead people, and it's been really exciting. They have been taking into account, the providers and the payers' interests and needs to find, a happy solution that kind of addresses both the range of different kinds of inputs and that you have, as well as rules and what I think Ankur calls it the intelligent routing. And so that is going to be able to hook our partners outside with our systems inside, using whatever mechanism makes the most sense for that particular situation. And it'll enable us to meet the CMS 57F requirement. But since we're there, we want to go further. So this is Edifecs' version kind of the same picture. And what I did was I just pasted our apps on top of their picture so you can kind of see this is a little bit more of the pipeline flow, obviously, because of the pipe metaphor. And this also shows some other pieces that they have, and they do. And we've actually talked about some of their other parts in their overall platform also. And they've got a consent management system and some other pieces. They've got a fire repository. So there's more to their system than just the parts I'm talking about. All right. So I'll walk you through the kind of the workflow that we're envisioning for the people to use, both people on outside and inside. So in our vision, for the people who do not have a system that is connected to us already, they don't have Epic, or they have Epic that's not connected to us, or maybe they have, hopefully we can eventually get connected to Athena, Cerner too, but right. But for the people who aren't connected to us right now, they need to get this to us some other way. And so this will be a portal. Maybe this will be used in tandem with a portal that we already have. Maybe this will supplement it. Maybe this will be for special cases. Not quite sure yet, but this is kind of the vision of what we want to accomplish. And, so this is like that pre-check part I was telling you about, right? Where, the provider staff person is going to put in the basic information about the member and the provider and the procedure codes and all that stuff, diagnosis dates. And then they're going to go to the pre-check. So they'll click a button or do the thing to go to the next step. And that comes over to our side. So the orange here is more like on our side, right? So the payer, the payer side, the plan side, receives that request. It's going to go through our Edifecs, and then it's going to ask our QNext and our interqual and our warehouse and whatever else we might have going on. We have a lot of different ways to track. We have a lot of different pieces to work with our PAs, probably like every plan. So it'll ask the questions of the parts that we need and to get the right answer back. Some examples of things that are not on this picture, but there are more than just this. In Oregon, we have this really specific set of rules about what procedures and diagnoses can and can't go together. And there also are like some procedures, and diagnosis. There's codes that we just cannot deal with too. That just are off the table. And there are things that we've predetermined don't need a PA. So right. So everybody, that's similar to probably what everybody has. So we'll go through all that, and we'll return that initial guidance. Okay. And then they're going to go, and then the flow of it's kind of go back to the provider side. Now, in a PowerPoint or something, it's hard to, you're kind of making a linear story, and you can't really show all the different paths that can go. So one path that would come back is they can't, they just say, you don't need a PA. What I'm doing here though, is I'm showing you the path where we need to tell them, the information that they need to understand to do the PA. So I would like to be able to get this out of our interqual and other places, right? And give them the cards, like they call it in Smart on Fire. So these are like the little categories of stuff that the people need to understand. Obviously, this is just fake data, But it'll tell them what they need and tell them what they need to get ready as much as we can up front so they can do that. So to the extent we can reduce the questions that our people have to ask them, that'd be good. So they'll be able to look at this and they can click on the stuff and zoom in and read it all, do whatever. And then they're going to come, and then if there are questions that we need to ask, and this is an interesting issue, if there are questions that we need to address, we want to ask the providers these questions. Now, I've been working with the nurse that we have here, with our nurse that takes care of our interqual system, and she's kind of been talking me through what the nurse's experience is on the provider side, and she's adamant that if we ask these questions, we're not really going to be able to use them as literal answers. It's more like to help get the provider thinking about what they need to be ready to address. So I just wanted to call that out here. We're not saying, provider, tell us, if this patient's listed for a transplant. Yes, great. We're not transplant. Sorry. We're not going to do it like that. But this will help us get them thinking about the things they need to tell us, and might help us tell them what documents we need in advance. So the spirit of this is just to advance the cause of getting things addressed up front if we can. Okay. So then they're going to go, like, if there are documents required, I don't know what that, there it goes. If there are documents required, then I want to, like in Smart on Fire, there's like a URL and then there's a little page where you can put the docs. But for our system, what I would like it to do is have a screen that lets them, tells them you need to give us this, this, and this. And they can upload those and send them to us. And we could then use this screen additionally if we need more documents. So if we get down the road and our specialists or our nurses need to know more, send us their provider chart notes or whatever it is. This screen could come back to the provider and they could add something to it. Again, that's hard to show in a kind of just like a quick slideshow, but there's several different paths that can happen. All right, so then they give us all that stuff, it comes back over to us. Now, in the cases that we can answer it automatically, we're just going to give them a determination, and I'll show you that screen in a second. But if we need to look at it, if our people need to look at it, the way we have it set up is our specialists look at it first, and then, I guess everybody in that group is a specialist, but the people that we have, the frontline people that look at them and see, what they have a set of things they can address, and they resolve those as far as they can. If they need the nurse to look at it or something, right? Which, then they can click on this little action to escalate, and then they're going to send that to our nurse. They can also respond to the provider and ask for documents, whatever. And there's also, this is just, of course, sample example, but there'd be, you'd be able to escalate to our MD as well. So when they do this, they might just approve it. They might deny it with information. There's obviously more that happens there, like letters and stuff, but just for the purposes of this discussion, this is kind of like how it would work. And then they're going to, then the PA in motion, I guess you could say, goes back to the provider staff, and they get a determination presented here. I do think there will be more statuses than just these, but an approved probably would have notes. Probably all of them would have notes, but you'd say approved, don't need a PA. In review might say, need might say in review, might say documents are needed, whatever. And denied, of course, denied is complicated because you have to, there's more that we have to tell them. There's things that have to happen with letters and other stuff behind the scenes. But this is kind of what that would be like for them. And so to the extent that, like a PA is approved, then it is actually already approved. If you think back to that slide I showed you with all of our apps, then that PA is actually approved on our QNext. So when we do get the claim eventually, we also have another little piece that we do that automatically tries to match up the PA with the claim. And so in a lot of cases, as many as you hope for, as many as you can, that little system that other system that we have will find the right PA, attach it to the claim, and then it can be adjudicated according to whatever the contract adjudication rules are. And then, so that's kind of that process, plus or minus a little bit, from the provider's perspective. And then I also want to just show you something that I really want to do for our people is I think we can take a big step forward. And there's probably a version of this for the provider too, actually, now that I think about it. But I think we can take a big step forward in visibility to help our people see how many PAs we have, the typical times for resolution, how many of different kinds, SLA stuff, you know, what the providers are, what kind of services, just whatever it is that's needed. And this will be able to pull, at least in my idea, this will be able to pull from our Edifecs, which knows certain things, and from our QNX and from our warehouse that know other things about, you know, the overall process and workflow. And I think that will be a step up for our people. And you know, if there's a version of this that's provider specific, that could be beneficial to the providers as well, I think. And okay, so that's basically the kind of the vision for that app and workflow. And then I'll just tell you a little bit about the ideal that we're hoping to do. And there are quite a few of us at CareOregon, and I know Edifecs is too. You know, we are looking to this ideal and doing what we can to meet it. There's an internal process review that is going on right now, and that needs to continue. We're going to look at buy or build. And really, there's a third one is, can we use something we already have? And then we have to do all the stuff to get ready for this 57F regardless. And then in the second half of the year, I think probably there's training both for our people and for the providers. You know, there's materials and stuff we need to say, we got this new way to do it, or we're changing the old way or whatever. And then we need to get Edifecs's, you know, base PA module set up. And any EDI or other connectivity things that we need to make it run. And of course, these guys are really good at that. And then we need to deploy the overall PA solution, which includes some things with them and some things with our systems and things that we make, whatever we use for the portal and interqual and our reporting system and whatever else, right? And then you know, what we need to do is be ready for 57F by the end of the year anyway, or before. And if we can get this in motion before this other stuff in motion before the end of the year, we can start watching how it works and start thinking about what our 2027 ROI goals should be. I don't think we're going to be able to figure out any kind of real ROI today. You know, we can speculate, but it's pretty soft. And so once we see it working, we can get a feel for, you know, kind of the value, you know, the value in the ROI sense. Obviously, there is value in, like, common sense tells you it's better to get these things resolved faster. So reducing time to determine, easy questions answered immediately if we can, as many easy questions as we can, and answer correctly immediately. And then if we need to get more information, we want to ask that as soon as we can to reduce kind of the, you know, the back and forth. I think everybody at a plan or a payer or a provider is used to that back and forth workflow of emailing, oh, I need this or whatever. And there's a lot of overall process quality improvement that we always are trying to make anyway. And this gives us another way to do that. And hopefully get more quality control. I mean, we have a pretty extensive quality control for downstream results, but hopefully that'll pair well with this increased visibility for kind of the aggregates and all that stuff. And you know, eventually get to this place where we say it's a defensible ROI and performance made. So anyway, that is my part of the presentation. Hopefully this has been interesting. I know that, you know, I know that everybody in the industry right now is trying to figure out what to do with all this, and I know that other plans and other vendors are working on, you know, figuring out visions that, you know, to get this all to get more benefit than just doing the compliance. And I'm really excited to see how that all shakes out. I think with everybody interested in how to hook all this stuff together, and then with the progress with FHIR, you know, I think I think, it's not too much longer before we start to see this become more of a reality. So anyway, thanks for listening to me. I really appreciate it. Appreciate everybody hosting us, and I want to give it back to Ankur because he has some more good stuff to share with you guys. So Ankur, I'm just going to mute, and you just tell me when to change slides. I can't hear you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Luke. Thank you so much. This was helpful. And I think it seems like yesterday since we started discussing, and then it has transpired to something that is this beautiful, right? It kind of takes a village to kind of do certain things, and it is proving out to be that, yes, we're trying to stand something up that can certainly be meaningful
Yeah.
for all.
Yeah.
Awesome, sir. If you can move to the next slide, I think
Yep.
what I wanted to do next was, as Luke kind of walked you through the entire workflow, he showed a box in the middle, which was Edifecs interrupt. And what I wanted to do was to zoom into that box and what does that box look like, or what does that box made of? Um, in reality, I think very well articulated that the problem is not of a side, it is persistent across the workflow. We talk about a source system. Unfortunately, there's not one, there are many. The world started with papers, faxes, evolved to call centers, portals, EDI, multiple new vendor portals coming up, and again, Fire 57F, right? Goal was to move away from everything that's legacy. The reality is everything that I've said here is existing today, more than what we would imagine. All of our plans, basically, as we have spoken to work with, and I think what we're learning more and more is that they do have still variety of interfaces where providers do fax today, where providers do have EDI transactions today. They have portals where they can submit these authorizations in proprietary or 278 formats. And they even have some non-EMR based setups where they can just submit some kind of an information. It can be flat files or other mechanisms. What Edifecs brings in this ecosystem is a platform basically that acts as a unified gateway to support prior authorizations. On the very left, you have the first EDI and proprietary FHIR transactions, right? And again, when I say FHIR transactions, it basically includes CRD, DTR paths that Luke walked us through, and then the additional provider and payer and patient APIs, right? What happens is basically in this workflow, when we start, we basically take these transactions, move into our content and translation bucket, which basically is responsible for one, identifying what the input is supporting or what the input is made of. Two, making sure to understand what the endpoint is accepting or made of, and make sure that translation is built in within the product. Two, it has a set of content rules which can be built in by the plan, end users, by us, can be built in through some automation, which we'll talk about, Excel uploads. Again, multiple ways to kind of create this content that potentially can bring that shift left mindset to reality, plus at the same time support a lot of the CRD and past processes that potentially are still being sent to the systems. There is a set of transactions that may not even need a prior auth to be created. And I know we all understand that. I think it's trying to find out the best way of doing that and making sure everybody in the ecosystem are made aware of that change that's basically happening. What we also bring with it is basically a UI that allows you to manage your endpoints. It's not just manage, it's basically see how your endpoints are basically accepting data, which formats are they accepting, how are you connecting to them, what's the workflow like. And Fire repository basically is storage is what comes with our product. With this also, if you look at the very bottom of the screen, visibility is something that we really take pride on, making sure that one, you have a clear path of sight or line of sight of where the transaction originated from, in what form, what all this transaction went through, and how it was finally converted or sent to the endpoint. The endpoints, like I think Luke kind of gave a very good example, and I think that prompted that a lot of that insight, right? When we started our discussions earlier this year, that Endpoints are also not one, right? They are delegated vendors, they are systems, they are policy vendors, there are proprietary homegrown systems, and all of them, or secondary or tertiary systems, right? There are all these different systems that potentially can be responsible for acting on a prior authorization, right? And today, all of that is managed in multiple different ways. So this basically what you see in the middle is a box that helps you think about, we're not here to replace any system, but help you orchestrate amongst your system in a most effective way that can help you invest in the right technologies areas. That's the goal we are looking at, right? Uh, if you move to the next slide, it is just a breakdown of how our system kind of behaves for these APIs. So again, providers can leverage Smart on Fire app. They can basically use uh, faxes. They can basically use EDIs, but the APIs are broken down into very, very specific areas, right? Coverage requests, CRD request, documentation, powered by CQL, pass request. And where does Edifecs come in picture? Basically, sitting in the middle, it basically has validation that it does on the inbound data, which is basically making sure one, it is compliant, two, it has all the required and mandatory data sets that are needed to perform a specific set of action, three, making sure there is clear visibility, but most importantly, four and five, which is determination rules and routing rules. So both of these are types of rules that we have managed to kind of get built within our system. Determination is basically all the different questions that are asked during a CRD workflow, such as whether a service is covered or not, whether a member is eligible or not, whether this service needs an authorization or not. All of those can be built in or configured or even automated within this platform or the rules engine that we're talking about here. Similarly, when I say routing rules, it's a similar concept, but routing is very much driven by the fact that you may have one or multiple endpoints, delegated vendors that you need to route to. And when we think about that, you can route to delegated vendors based on specialities, based on taxonomies, based on procedure codes, diagnosis codes, right? All of those becomes our primary key objectives to make sure we can connect these two systems in a way that's most efficient. Um, from a payer perspective, what we expect or what we look for is just trying to make sure that there is enough information that we can start shifting left on, which moves with procedure codes, line of businesses, and what systems basically that combination can route to. And if there's any action can happen between our code and procedures, such as ACPT code with no auth required, that's a rule. And I think I'll have some time to walk you through quickly through some of the screenshots to kind of show you how the system is. At the end of the day, I think we are still routing to only two areas, right? Utilization management system, policy management systems, or any plan system, connecting even eligibility systems if needed, right? So our goal here is to kind of make sure that we understand that this, however complex this ecosystem is, we understand that it is not easy for us to manage, maintain, or plans to manage, maintain it. And that's why it needs a partnership where we come together and understand the problem to its core to address it in a most meaningful way, right? That's the end state we want to reach at. Not just making sure that yes, we support these five APIs. Yes, these five APIs are going to be something that are going to be available for you day one. Yes, there's going to be reports out on these APIs. That's that's something that we understand is bare minimum, right? That's not the goal. The goal is to actually focus on what burden reduction would mean in such a setup. If we can move to the next slide. So let's think about a real world use case. We have been talking about this, but you have portals, EDIs, which are submitting to a system. You have Fire coming through different channels, which basically also brings a visibility gap, right? You have a different channel submitting EDI, different channel submitting Fire, different channel submitting fax, and then you have multiple tailored reports that are built at the back end trying to consolidate all that data. Now you need matrix that need to be generated out of that data that needs more work on that data. And then you basically have Fire basically with the new CRD pass that's coming in, right? How that process is still evolving, but how can that process be made more automated, right? So if we move to the next slide, we potentially will talk about how this basically setup looks like in a real world, right? And like I said, how much farther we have come from a journey perspective, the the real automation is just beginning in real sense, in true sense. And when I say that with the mindset of not just saying that we have not been automating. No, all of us have been looking at ways to automate, trying to do things in the right way. But now we have the power of compliance that's pushing towards it, right? And what it does is basically, if you look at Smart on Fire apps or provider portal or faxes, basically all are part of the prior auth Edifecs solution workflows that are built in. For APIs, again, these are REST API connections. For portals, it has proprietary data that's again fed using API connections or files or 278s that are dropped. Faxes basically come in through the channels where we basically are using our own homegrown AI technology to convert our faxes into a not just a 278 or a prior auth transaction, a compliant fire transaction, right? So it's not that we are just trying to take a fax and make sure that it can file into a UM system, make sure that that fax is converted to fire and that fire brings the ecosystem all together, right? But fire or no fire, right? Real time or batch, it does not matter. For us, the engine that we basically have is able to understand, interpret, and then make sure that the connections that are built out are able to route and send to these endpoints based on multiple factors. So if you look on the right, these are just some examples that we have tried to lay out. Delegated vendor one who has a fire API, and we route them for radiology and imaging services. A vendor two who basically has a non-fire, non-standard API. And they're all looking at physical therapy and rehabilitations. Delegated vendor three, who is basically also non-fire, is only looking at cardiology services. And then if there is any additional documentation or EDI integration needed for DMEs, oncology services, laboratory, right? So it's easier said than done, but what the 30 plus years of work that Edifecs has done basically in the space has helped us build a strong ecosystem of multiple transaction sets that can basically be understood, interpreted, and converted to the most meaningful output that the endpoints are looking at. And that's where we want to make sure that we leverage our overall strengths to provide the best value out of the solution. So if you move to the next slide, just to share a glimpse of what that looks like. And again, this is just a visual from one of our Edifecs solutions. If you look at a fax image that came in as a PNG or a JPEG or even a PDF, is initially converted into a JSON that's then interpreted and understood and converted into a prior auth, depending upon which prior auth endpoint we are trying to connect to, Fire, 278, or custom. And then basically processing and sending it to the endpoint, right? How do we apply our rules and how the process occurs is basically what we'll talk about in our next slides. But overall, what you see here is pure visibility, right? So if we can move to the next slide. And maybe if we can move to the next slide, let's come back to this one a little later. I want to cover a few more um, visuals on a high level. So this is basically our Edifecs intelligent router solution that Luke kind of mentioned uh, during his presentation. So basically what you see here is a intuitive UI that allows you to configure three things. And three things that you see on the screen are endpoints, routing rules, and decision rules. When I say endpoints, what is an endpoint? An endpoint can be anything, a UM system or a policy system. What you see on the screen is a representation of how that endpoints are structured. The endpoints can be CRD, DTR, pass. It can be fire, non-fire. What is the outbound acceptance that the endpoint is looking for? What is the line of business? And if there is any action that basically needs to happen on this endpoint other than routing, right? So all of that is presented in this table, but it is something that this tool allows you to configure or build in, add in within the platform. If you move to the next slide, Routing rule, primarily as the name suggests, it basically allows you to apply a certain set of criterias on the incoming transaction to make sure that this transaction can find a safe house at the end, which means that if a transaction basically has, let's assume a CRD transaction, right? A CRD transaction basically comes with patient, provider, coverage, and we do have information with regards to the procedure or the diagnosis. We do have information with regards to the NPI. We can certainly ask for more information with regards to taxonomies, which is not directly available. But when we think of all of this information that we're just talking about, right? All of this allows us to kind of think through a solution that can help enable a custom rule that can allow you to decide when do you want to route it to a specific endpoint. And when I say that, if you can go to the next slide, this is basically a simple way of showing how these rules can basically function together. And what you see, the list is a list of fields that are either directly or indirectly available within our CRD or PaaS transaction. It can be provider NPIs, taxonomies, TIN, uh, any kind of specialty, any kind of priority that you may want to leverage. And operators are very simple. These are human readable. These are human configurable. Again, we are not asking or needing for anyone to write complex rules, complex code, complex logics now. These are very simple and or operators that we have tried to use in a more meaningful way on the UI so that you can add the list of CPT codes, for example, and if that value matches, you can define where you would want to reach, right? Meaning you can select a specific endpoint where you would need to route to. So if you can click on the next slide. The scope, right? And that's what we're calling a scope here. So the scope basically here is, okay, when you have gone through this process, your step one was determining, is the member eligible? Yes, the member is eligible. Is the service that is being requested for this member covered? Yes, the service requested for this member is covered. Is the service that is covered for this eligible member requiring an authorization? The answer is again yes. Yes, the service requires an authorization. After that workflow that I just explained, the last step occurs is, okay, is any documentation needed? And that's where the need of documentation basically is driven by either a set of documents that are hosted by the plan or endpoints such as Intercol or MCG, such as other policy vendors who are already housing these medical guidelines and medical necessity criteria within their product space. And what this shows or what this allows is basically once you select this endpoint here, there is going to be a backend configuration that is going to be basically helping this product understand how are you connecting to this endpoint. When I say how, is it a REST API based connection? Is it a folder drop? Is it basically a standard fire transaction? Is it a custom flat file transaction or an EDI transaction? All of these are pre-built, pre-configured set of translations that are built and available within the product. Meaning for you to allow you to configure to these standard endpoints, we already have a lot of these pre-built integrations that we have been able to tap into and build these standard integrations that not just gives us a lot of how we can build this, but also to quickly translate this into from implementation to delivery, right? To realization phase. If you can click on the next slide, I think that should be the last one, and then we can quickly go back to the ROI slide. I think I wanted to quickly share what the decision rules are and what I was explaining in my previous slide around any service not covered or prior auth required or not required or documentation needed. All of this is mentioned here, right? Again, very similar approach, a very simple user-friendly UI that allows you to use and/or operators to configure these rules. And then based on these, you can certainly select add values, but at the same time, you can define where you would want to finally route this to or what is the action. At any given point in time, if the system is unsure, uncertain, or not able to identify a specific set of action, our system is not meant to take decisions based on just pure recommendations. Our system is meant to analyze it and help that recommendation to surface to the UM systems, right? Because again, unless and until we have a very clear outcome, clear determination from the plan or from our system, we will not be able to take that decision, right? So that is basically the last slide for this. And Luke, if just a request, if you can move back to 2 slides up, I think a couple of more slides, I think. Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. So when we started this discussion, I think we knew that it is going to be very similar to what we have been hearing throughout the year around the 57F mandate. But I think what I wanted to make sure that Luke and I, when we discussed, when we have been working together, just think through what it really makes sense, right? It is a compliance, but the goal is not to just comply. The goal is to realize the ROI. And again, I think that was the same message that Luke kind of tried to share, that bridging this gap is key for us, right? It's not just new technology. How can we bring new tools within our ecosystem or replace our existing tools? It's more about how can we drive improvements even with existing technology, right? Not changing too many boxes on either side, but making sure there is one compatible box sitting in the middle that can allow you to understand, interpret everything that's happening, right? Second is primarily how we think about this overall approach of reducing the touch points that are basically happening, right? If we are able to answer a lot of questions in a quick turnaround time, that basically is our very a win in itself, right? If we are able to reduce 15-20% of prior authorizations that are right now being looked at by the UM staff, we have our win there. If you're able to have providers automatically feed in our question and answers for DTR requests that are basically being uh, exchanged, that there is the win, right? Provider burden, payer burden, UM staff burden, anything that we can do to make sure that we think through holistically on areas we can impact. And at the end of the day, we have the system working together. What this means is basically FHIR already has been proven that compliance has proven that yes, FHIR is a medium that can be used to connect. It is an asset, and every API transaction or data field is reusable across this process, across routing, providing analytics, right? And overall tracking, managing, and realizing these right level of insights, highlighting it to our plans, our partners, and making it a point that we can not just share visualizations or dashboards. No, making sure that we can share outcomes that can meaningfully help our plans and our partners to reach to a conclusion of how this can basically benefit them and their providers or their staff. Um, so yeah, I think with that, I'll probably Luke, just opening it up for you if you had any closing thoughts, any closing remarks here.
No, I thought that was awesome.
Perfect. So Mike, over to you.
Ankur, Luke, thank you very much for a fantastic presentation.
Yeah,
For
thank you.
everyone here, the slides as well as the recording will be sent to all registrants of this event. We look forward to seeing you in the near future. This is the final spotlight event for WEDI in 2025, and we wish you all a happy holiday. Take care.
Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Take care.